So good evening. On behalf of Samir Al-Qasim, who organized this event, and myself, Dagmar Pater, and the whole Jerusalem Fund Palestine Center, we welcome you on this really, really significant and sad evening. We are delighted to have our four poets here tonight. I always say, I like a sentence that was attributed to Edward Said, which is that let the power of culture conquer the culture of power. And that's what we're hoping to do tonight. In commemoration of the Nakba, ongoing for the last 70 years, and especially in light of the, so far, as far as I know tonight, 55 killed and 2,400 wounded today in Gaza, we're going to have a night of poems that will reflect on exile, siege, war, and resistance. Our four poets are Zeina Azzam, Zein El-Amine, Sharif Elmusa, and Kim Jensen. There are biographies of each of the poets on flyers that are outside, and so you can get to know them, but I don't want to take any more time away from their reading time. So let us begin. Thank you.
Thanks for the Jerusalem Fund for all the work they do and for sponsoring this tonight in particular. I'm not going to read first, but I'm going to say a few words, just a few words in prose, and then we'll have the readings. We'll start with Zein El-Amine, and then Zeina Azzam, and then myself, and then Kim Jensen. Okay. Darwish has a poem entitled A State of Siege, which I will read later. And I want to say a couple of quick words about this state of siege. Some people, whose name I won't mention, claim we have a state. Yes, we have a state, but it is a state of siege. We are under siege in Gaza, we are under siege in Jerusalem, in Ramallah, in Bethlehem, in Nazareth, in Jaffa, in Jericho, in Haifa, in al-Fahm, in Hebron, and in Nablus. We are under siege from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea. We're under siege in Washington, D.C. We're under siege by the White House and by Congress that doesn't seem to know about public opinion when it comes to Israel. We're under siege by Fox News and by CNN and by all the main networks. We're under siege by the New York Times and by the Washington Post. We're under siege by the mainstream press. And it is this bad poem that we want to come to an end. In the meantime, as the German playwright Bertolt Brecht once asked, in the dark times, will there also be singing? And he answered, yes, there will be also singing about the dark times. So Zein El-Amine.
Good afternoon, everybody, or good evening, rather. Also, we're under siege by NPR, because they seem to lose their active verbs when it comes to reporting on Palestine. 50 people died in Gaza. Of what? Of sorrow? No, they were killed. They were killed. And until we claim our public airwaves, we're Fox and CNN is one thing, but NPR is just disgusting when it comes to, we have to claim those first. I wanted to start with a poem actually from an anthology called Ghost Fishing, and I'll put a plug for it. Many environmental anthologies don't address war, and many environmentalists are, progressive except for Palestine, PEPs we call them. But this anthology is one that addresses war in a huge section called Instead of Flowers. And everybody's here, Naomi Shihab Nye, and Darwish is here, and so on. And I'm happy to be in there too. And the first poem I'm going to read is called The Dogs of Ashdod. And in the most recent invasion, I can't keep up with the Israeli cutting of the grass, they call it, which is basically the massacres that they've. But in the last massacre in Gaza, there were pet owners in Ashdod that were complaining about all the noise. All the noise was the bombing of Gaza. And a reporter from the Jerusalem Post decided to make a call out to pet owners in Ashdod, Israeli pet owners, because she was concerned about the dogs. So this inspired this poem. The dogs of Ashdod are nervous because of the sirens. Their plight is catalogued in the Jerusalem Post. Yuri inquires, "Is this the Onion?" The reporter replies, "This is a serious problem for the southern pet owner." A 3-year-old in Gaza crawls under his bed, makes a lullaby of the rebar hum in the concrete. He assures his aunt that his parents can beat back the bombs, but if that fails, he tells her he has a cache of candy he can offer the enemy. 15-year-old Muhammad is on Skype, his face fading in and out of the computer light. He tells me it sounds like a monster DJ playing disco outside. His voice is drowned by the deadly beat and the dogs of Ashdod barking. The second poem I wanted to read is a section, not the whole thing, of Darwish, the dice player. And I guess the theme that I wanted to impart here is that poetry and Darwish's poetry embeds us so much as Arabs and Palestinians specifically, embeds us so far in humanity that it's hard to uproot us from it. And this is one of those poems that I feel does that well. And this is a poem that I can relate to because the events that he talks about have happened to me personally. And I'm only going to read you a part of it. And I know some Darwish fans are going to say this is sacrilege. But I would encourage you to listen to Le Trio Gibran, who did a whole album with Mahmoud Darwish. And this is one of the bits that they played with him reading in the background. I was surprised when I was on Spotify one day, sort of fine-tuning a station, and suddenly Darwish's voice came on, and it was a miraculous moment. So this is The Dice Player by Mahmoud Darwish, and this was published in Virginia Quarterly Review, one of my favorite literary journals. And this was translated by Fadi Jouda, the Palestinian poet. Some of you know him. Who am I to say to you what I say to you, when I'm not a stone burnished by water to become a face, or a reed punctured by wind to become a flute? I'm a dice player. I win some and lose some, just like you or a little less. Born beside the water well and 3 lonely trees that stand like nuns. Without parade or midwife, I was given my name by chance, belonged to a family by chance, and inherited its traits, features, and illnesses. First, arterial disease and high blood pressure. Second, shyness when addressing my parents and the tree, my grandmother. Third, a hope in being cured of influenza with a cup of hot chamomile. Fourth, a laziness when speaking about does and larks. Fifth, a boredom in winter nights. Sixth, a failure in singing. I had no hand in being. It was coincidence that I turned out male, and coincidence that I saw a pale moon like a lemon tree encroaching on women in late nights. And I did not try hard to find a mole in my most private body parts. It was possible that that my father not be my mother's husband, and that I could have resembled my sister who screamed and died without noticing she was alive for only an hour and did not know her mother. Or I could have been a dove's egg before the chick cracked the shell. It was coincidence that I was the one alive in the bus accident, because I didn't board the bus. I'd forgotten about existence and its matters, reading through the night before a love story in which I impersonated the author and the lover, the victim, then became love's martyr, but alive in the traffic accident. I had no hand in playing with the sea, though I was a reckless child who fancied sauntering around water's gravity as it called, "Come to me." I had no hand in surviving the sea. A human seagull saved me when he saw the waves catch and paralyze my arms. And I could have not been afflicted with the jinn of the Mu'allaqat had the house's gate faced north instead of overlooking the sea, and had the army patrol not seen the village smoke baking the night. Had 15 martyrs been able to rebuild the barricades and that agricultural place not broken, I might have become an olive tree. A geography teacher, an expert in ants, or echo's guardian. Who am I to say to you what I say to you at the church's door when I'm only a dice throw between predator and prey? I gained in clarity not to enjoy my moonlit nights, but to witness the massacre. By chance I survived. I was smaller than a military target and larger than a bee moving among the fence flowers. I feared for my brothers and father, and for a time made of glass, for my cat and rabbit, for a magical moon over the high minaret. I feared for the grapevine that dangled like our dog's teats. Then fear walked me, and I walked in it barefoot, forgetting my little memories of what I want of tomorrow. No time for tomorrow. I'd walk, jog, run, ascend, descend, scream, bark, howl, call, wail, speed up, slow down, plummet, lighten, dry up, march, fly, see, not see, stumble, turn yellow, green, blue, crack, sob, thirst, tire, starve, get up, run, forget, see, not see, remember, hear, envision, mumble, hallucinate, whisper, scream or not, moan, go mad, get lost, become less, become more, drop, soar, descend, bleed, fall unconscious. The last poem I wanted to read, I wanted to weave back to hope. Basically, we did the cataloging of misery, and so let's weave back to hope. This was written, a poem written by Michael Collier, who used to be the poet laureate of in Maryland, and who visited my tiny village of Darkifa in South Lebanon, and he visited it in the wake of the 2006 war. And he wasn't a political or a controversial poet, but he came back and published this poem. Michael Collier is a beekeeper, and he was my teacher in college. And when he visited Der Kifa, he met with the beekeeper in Der Kifa, and they walked for miles, and my father was watching him. Later he tells me, he's like, what are these people talking about? I said, what do you mean? He says, well, that guy doesn't know Arabic and that guy doesn't know English. So what are they doing? Talking bee language? Like, bzzz. What's happening? How are they talking for hours? But anyway, so this is called The Bees of Der Kifa. And this was published in the Virginia Quarterly Review. And sometimes I read this like a prayer because it is about resistance, and we need prayers right now. And he dedicated that to me and my brother Bilal, who lives in Lebanon now. The Bees of Der Kifa. The sun going down is lost in the gorge to the south, lost in the rows of olive trees, light in the webs of their limbs. This is the time when the thousands and thousands come home. It is not the time for the keeper's veil and gloves. Not the time for stoking the smoker with pine needles. It would be better to do that at midday under a hot sun. When the precincts are quieter, it would be better to disturb few rather than many. At noon, the hives are like villages, gates open toward the sun, or like small countries, carved from empires to keep the peace, each with its habits. Some ruled by better queens, some frantic and uncertain, some with drifting populations, others busy with robbing, and even the wasps and hornets, the fierce invaders who have settled among the natives, are involved in the ancient trades. But now, with the sun gone, the blue summer twilight tinged with time, and the silver underside of olive leaves, calm in the furrowed groves, darkening the white chunks of limestone exposed in the tillage, the keeper in his vestments squeezes the bellows of the smoker, blows a thin blue stream into an entrance, loosens the top like a box lid, and delivers more. For a while, the hive cannot understand what it says to itself. Now a single babble presides in the alleys and passageways. And as block by block, the keeper takes his census, he could go ungloved, unveiled, if it weren't for the unpacified, the unconfused, returning, mouths gorged with nectar, legs orange with pollen, landing, amassing, alerting the lulled to scale the wax trellis, to find the glove's worn thumb, the hood's broken zipper, and plant an eviscerating stinger. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming tonight. My name is Zeina Azzam, and I'm delighted to be here. I'd like also to thank Samira Al-Qasim and Dagmar Painter for inviting us, and I'm so honored to be reading with my fellow poets and sister poet. As we know, the Nakba started in 1948, and it continues to this day, to this very, very day. And I would like to, I think on behalf of all of us, dedicate this reading to the brave and steadfast Palestinians in Gaza and in the West Bank and East Jerusalem, inside Israel and in the diaspora. I'd like to start with a poem by Fadwa Khan, who was born in Nablus in 1917. She died in 2003. Mahmoud Darwish named her the mother of Palestinian poetry. I think I love this poem because of the last line. You'll see what I mean. The Deluge and the Tree, by Fadwa Khan. When the hurricane swirled and spread its deluge of dark evil onto the good green land, they gloated. The western sky is reverberated with joyous accounts. The tree has fallen, the great trunk is smashed, the hurricane leaves no life in the tree. Has the tree really fallen? Never, not with our red streams flowing forever, not while the wine of our thorn limbs feed the thirsty roots, Arab roots alive, tunneling deep, deep into the land. When the tree rises up, the branches shall flourish green and fresh in the sun. The laughter of the tree shall leaf beneath the sun, and birds shall return. Undoubtedly, the birds shall return. The birds shall return. One of my favorite poets, as some of you probably know, is Naomi Shihab Nye. She writes about Palestinians in a very personal way. Naomi Shihab Nye lives in San Antonio, Texas, and her father, her late father, was a Palestinian from Jerusalem. He had to flee during the Nakba in 1948, the beginning of the Nakba. Naomi reflects about the experience of exile, and this poem is particularly about her grandmother, who lives in Jerusalem, or who lived in Jerusalem. She's passed away, but she's had so many relatives in exile in the diaspora. This is the generation that experienced the beginning of the Nakba, the first pains of the Palestinian people. The Words Under the Words by Naomi Shihab Nye. The dedication is for Sitti Khadra, north of Jerusalem. My grandmother's hands recognize grapes, the damp shine of a goat's new skin. When I was sick, they followed me. I woke from the long fever to find them covering my head like cool prayers. My grandmother's days are made of bread, around pat-pat and the slow baking. She waits by the oven, watching a strange car circle the streets. Maybe it holds her son, lost to America. More often, tourists who kneel and weep at mysterious shrines. She knows how often mail arrives, how rarely there is a letter. When one comes, she announces it, a miracle, listening to it read again and again in the dim evening light. My grandmother's voice says nothing can surprise her. Take her the shotgun wound and the crippled baby. She knows the spaces we travel through, the messages we cannot send. Our voices are short and would get lost on the journey. Farewell to the husband's coat, the ones she has loved and nourished, who fly from her like seeds in a deep sky. They will plant themselves. We will all die. My grandmother's eyes say Allah is everywhere, even in death. When she talks of the orchard and the new olive press, when she tells the stories of Jaha and his foolish wisdoms, he is her first thought. What she really thinks of is his name. Answer if you hear the words under the words. Otherwise, it is just a world with a lot of rough edges, difficult to get through, and our pockets full of stones. As you know, land is very important for Palestinians. Our attachment to the land, our connection to the land. It's the basis of everything. I'd like to read a poem by Rajat Husein. He had a very short life from 1936 to 1977. He was born in Musmus, Palestine, left in 1966 to go to Syria and Lebanon, and later New York City, where he died tragically in a fire. This is With the Land by Rajat Husein. The land comes near me, drinks from me, leaves its orchards with me to become a beautiful weapon defending me. Even when I sleep, the land comes near me in my dream. I smuggle its wild thyme between exiles. I sing its stones. I will even sweat blood from my veins to drink its news. So the land comes near me, leaves a stone of love with me to defend it and defend me. When I repay it, I will embrace it 1,000 times. I will worship it 1,000 times. I will celebrate its wedding on my forehead, on the rubble of exiles and the ruins of prisons. I will drink from it will drink from me, so that the Galilee would remain, beauty, struggle, and love, defending it, defending me. I see the land, a morning that will come, and the land will come near me. Next, I'd like to read a few poems that I've written myself. The first is a poem that I wrote for an exhibition that Dagmar had here. It was an exhibition about forbidden colors, the colors of the Palestinian flag that Palestinians could not use under occupation. So she asked me to write a poem for the exhibit, and I did, and here it is. Colors for the Diaspora. Blue-green, watery globe, tugging to a red core. We are a distant comet, white cloud of unburnished rocks, frisking the heavens for an arc to earth, sea, home. Green-brown Palestine, cactus fruit and wild thyme, olive orchards, cypress trees. We travel on your mountain tops, tethered by voices from suitcases and the yaw of blackened keys. Blue-black night, silver stars of ancestors traveling a displaced orbit around a lost sun, repeating, when will we see the colors of our land? When will we land? So this next poem is one that I wrote about my father, who died in 1999. I don't think I've ever read this in public, actually. I think a lot about Palestinian refugees from 1948 and how displacement and exile, how they age with it, how that experience stays with them all their lives. And so the next two poems, the first one's about my father and the second about my mother. My father is now a memory. My father is now a memory, dreamlike, clinging, fleeting, rooted. I will nurture it as he nurtured his plants, babies in a cradle, rocking gently. The roses in the garden mourn. He loved us, we loved him. The figs stand still, wishing for his tenderness. My father searched for Palestine in them, the memory of sweetness reawakened, nostalgia guiding him homeward. I can't remember him as a younger man anymore. He's an older man with clouds for hair, crevices in the earth of his face, a waterfall nose, crescent moon smile. He would sing snippets of a song, recite a line of poetry. Sometimes it would make sense, sometimes it was out of place. He might laugh heartily, amused by a memory. He tried to teach my children to lick a drop of coffee from his little finger, as he had done with me on his lap decades ago. He clung to memories, found solace in reliving, replicating. Maybe he could find a home for the old and the new. My father yearned for the homeland he saw again only once in 50 years. We should never have left, he would say, out of the blue, shaking his head. They shot your neighbor. It was wartime. Deir Yassin had just come to light. No matter. We should have stayed. Maybe he would have been killed too. Maybe I would never have been born. A fig tree cut down, a fig imagined. 15 roses he bought the day before he died, planted only 3. My mother gave the others away to friends one by one. They will yearn for him, be planted far from home, refugees in diaspora. He loved us, we loved him. Thank you. So, as I mentioned, this is a poem to my mother. It's called After 93 Years. Your body has withered, a once supple fruit, plump and smooth, now desiccated by the fires of years, the crippling fear of war, a young bride fleeing, hoisting a baby and a suitcase of clothes, a key, what gold you could wear, traversing a burning country, then another, wondering if you would ever see the sea at Haifa again. The Mediterranean left its trace in everything from then on. Olives and figs, cedar trees, a turquoise necklace, dresses in azure blue, watery sunsets and opposing moons. But your yearnings appended so many times that now you're always afraid of a pebble underfoot, the possibility of rain, a slight wheeze, backaches that keep you awake. Even knocks on the door make your shoulders clench, seize. So you summon the good years, carry them like badges in embroidered purses, opened for the world to see. The thin skin of your hands barely covering delicate blue veins. There are no tears, as if stones are allegories for hearts, and so much slips away slowly as your body wanes. The last poem is a little more upbeat. It's about the concept of khair in Arab culture. You know, khair is the Arabic word for goodness, and we say it all the time. Goodness pervades our culture. In fact, the original title of this poem was "My Culture is Obsessed with Khair," but I cut it down, and the title is just Khair, goodness. From the time farmers rise with the sun until night descends, there is talk of it. Songs and Quranic verses about khair, morning of khair, evening of khair. There's no getting around goodness. Tusbahi ala khair, my mother would wish me as she kissed my forehead at bedtime. May you wake up to goodness. Later I learned to respond, wa inti min ahlo, may you be part of its family, the family of khair. Even watching TV, as we waited for bad news from Gaza, she would admonish, khair inshallah, goodness, God willing. No matter the misfortune, she was sure Allah would eventually bring khair to Palestine. Maybe it all started with her neighbors in Jaffa, the family whose name was Khair Allah, God's goodness. From kindness to comity, their ancestors packed so much in this name. It was a hedge against hardship, an incantation in their bones, Palestine's bones, where khair resides from morning till night, in a mother's kiss at bedtime, deep in a farmer's land. There, the roots of khair multiply in the earth, goodness bristling. Thank you.
Darwish, as you heard Zain reading him, has what Robert Bly called leaping imagination. it's very difficult to kind of keep up with him. Just jumps from one image to another, one idea to another. In this poem, Stage of Siege, which he wrote during the Second Intifada, in an actual siege also. I translated it, and it was published in Poetry Ireland Review in Ireland, not here. And it's made of many fragments. I first abridged it, and today I'm going to abridge it again. And I think here he is less sleeping, because really you are under siege, and it makes you more intimate with, and kind of closer to, you feel like something might happen. So, okay. So the first fragment. Here on the slopes of the hills, watching sunsets, facing the canyons of time. Here by orchards with severed shadows, we do what prisoners do, what the unemployed do. We nurse hope. The siege will last until we teach our enemy selections of classical Arabic poetry. The soldiers gauge the distance between being and nothingness with a tank's telescope. We gauge the distance between our bodies and shells with the sixth sense. You who stand on our doorstep, come in and drink coffee with us. Drink Arabic coffee with us. You might feel you are human like us. You who stand on our doorstep, get out of our mornings so we can be certain we are humans like you. The siege will last until those who lay the siege feel, like the besieged, that boredom is a human condition. Our coffee cups, the birds and green trees with blue shade, and sun leaping from wall toward another wall like a deer, and water in clouds of endless forms spread across whatever ration of sky is left for us, and things whose remembrance is deferred, and this morning, strong and luminous, all beckon. We are guests of eternity. The second poem I'm going to read is from Gaza. I worked there for 4 months in 1997. And I even felt then that Gaza was under siege. Gaza was under siege always, in fact. And a friend of mine asked me, in the email, he said, "What do you do there?" I said, "There is really not much to do. I just watch moons and donkeys." And so the poem is called Moons and Donkeys. It's also in many fragments, but I will read very few tonight. Moons and Donkeys. Gaza is a cage, barbed wired on the inland sides, the sea mostly of limits, no mountains, no valleys, the place is flat. Forget about movies, books, and bars. The war is set to be over, the price paid, and will be paid further. A torpid peace is settling in. What were the prophets smitten by? I am told the yellow finches perch on the fence, consider, smell the rampant sewers, then went back to the desert. I go around like an ancient Chinese poet watching moons and donkeys. A second fragment. After a few weeks, the spirit corrugated, like the rooftops in the refugee camps. My feet walked backward, like the feet of the shoeless children. At dawn, the muezzin's megaphones clash, overlap, each spurred on to us, louder, louder for prayer, to amplify to God our impotence. The ash-colored donkey was pregnant and flaunting it, bellyful, hanging low like the night's moon. She stepped into the road, slowly, deliberately, then balked, turned her head this way and that. All the honking fell on deaf ears. I watched from my stopped car this smock checkpoint, this street theater. I want to cross borders unseen, like salmon, like contaminated wind. Scores of fishing boats spread out of the meager port at the depth of the night, their kerosene lamps and oases of light, soft, yellow, a beauty hard to conquer or resist. The fishermen doze off and row again. The last section. A daily summer ritual, a wedding motorcade in the late afternoon, a few cars for the lucky ones, a bus and a pickup truck or two packed with young boys who laugh and dance, clap and sing like birds singing to make themselves visible in the cage. That's it. Okay, this is the last poem. It is, I wrote it, kind of in connection with Ahad Tamimi. You all know her. I don't really mention her name here, but she is the central figure here, really. The poem is called Pallywood. The computer underlines the word in red. Wrong, no such word. But there is such a word. See Wikipedia. Words are made up, make themselves up. Words are wild. Words are actors. Pallywood means Palestinian propaganda. I like the word, brainchild of historian Richard Landis, because it hints at a light-hearted core in his bleak imaginings of the Palestinians. Israel, high-tech, prosperous, the only democracy in the Middle East, more deserving of the annual allowance from its special friends in Washington than Puerto Rico and shithole states. Israel does not need propaganda. My bringing up this snide term of endearment is prompted by a recent inconclusive investigation by an Israeli multidisciplinary committee of a medley of Palestinian blondes acting as family defending village land. I can empathize with the suspicions of the members of the committee. A whole family of blondes would be European, at least of European origin, as asserted in the published part of the report. Palestinian families we know are dark, like, say, my family, even though my mother was blonde. We are Arabs, and Arab Jews revert back to their darkness. Never mind my Uncle Shakir's all blonde family, which only proves every rule has a blonde exception. Palestinians like playing with words, like actors. Remember Edward Said, whose organic name was Muhammad, not Edward, and he knew it. He had lobbied his father to name him Edward because he wanted to be a European, and more precisely, a European organic intellectual who speaks truth to power. Imagine. In reality, Edward was his blonde nom de guerre when Palestinians were genuine terrorists strutting in olive oil green fatigues. Today, Pali would picture them as genuine victims. A brazen case in point is the clip from the village of An-Nabi Saleh, the Prophet Saleh, built tactlessly in the middle of Israeli settlements. No doubt, a fictional place name. Has anyone ever heard of a Prophet Saleh? There, a blonde girl was prompted to play the daughter of blonde parents, and with her small hand slapped the half-bird soldier's face because he reacts with restraint while being filmed by a crowd of cell phones. The sequel was predictable. The army will cuff the girl's reckless hands and the courts corral her into jail as they did a million others before, with no discrimination as to age or gender, only national origin. And the reel will go viral, and the village will be embraced as the blonde victim, darling of human rights believers, far-left academics, doped artists, overrated writers, self-serving foreign aid agents, anti-Semites, Jews not in love with Israel, endangered liberation theologians, nostalgic labor leaders, the usual suspects. Palestinians, it must be conceded, are actors ad absurdum and can't get off the stage. Didn't they sell their land to Jews, dear land to Jews, for a handful of sterling pounds? Didn't they abandon their homes in 1948 and would do it again if forced to? See, trouble looms. Palestinians are acting. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming. Thank you to the Palestine Center, Dagmar, Samira, for hosting us, and thank you to the fellow poets for sharing all of these words of other poets and yourselves. Can you guys hear me? So I'm Kim Jensen. I drove down from Baltimore. I'm blonde, but I'm not a Palestinian blonde. However, I've spent a lot of time in Palestine. And I'm especially honored to be here because some of you know and some of you probably don't know, but all of the art on the walls is my husband's art and my son's art. And I wanted to be here on Nakba Day to also partake in the show that's going on as well. And so a lot of my experience in Palestine is in Tamani wa Arba'in, or 1948, aka colonized Palestine, aka Israel. And that's kind of where I've spent so much time. And my husband, Zahi, is from a small town outside of Nazareth, which is called Rainy, which happens to be the same small town that Dareen Tatour, the poet, who has been recently convicted of incitement to violence. She is from Rainy. So I got the chance to meet her when she came from home arrest in Tel Aviv back to house arrest in Rainy. I spent a lot of time with her and the family, and I've been covering the case for a couple of years now for Mondaweiss and Electronic Intifada. And so I've developed this relationship with the family and Dareen. So I thought I would start my reading tonight with the poem on this horrible day, on this terrifying day. And I don't know how many of you guys, first of all, how many of you know about the case of Dareen Tatour and what's going on? I should say that she's going to be sentenced on, in case you don't know, she'll be sentenced on May 30th. That's coming up. So please stay tuned, because this struggle is not going to end. The solidarity campaign is very strong. The people around her are strong. The international campaign is strong. And I spoke with her on the phone after the conviction. When I heard about the conviction, my heart was in my shoes. I was so devastated. And then when I talked to the family, it was funny. They cheered me up because they were all laughing in the courtyard. Not laughing, but talking and amongst each other. And she has a lot of support around her, and we should keep up that support. So what she was arrested for was the poem Resist, My People Resist Them, which many of you have seen the video. And I was going to read something different, but with what's happening today, I thought that's the poem to read tonight, is the poem for the resistance. And this was translated by Tariq El-Haidar. Resist my people, resist them. In Jerusalem, I dressed my wounds and breathed my sorrows and carried the soul in my palm for an Arab Palestine. I will not succumb to the peaceful solution, never lower my flags until I evict them from my land. I cast them aside for a coming time. Resist my people, resist them. Resist the settlers' robbery and follow the caravan of martyrs. Shred the disgraceful constitution which imposed degradation and humiliation and deterred us from restoring justice. They burned blameless children. As for Hadil, they sniped her in public, killed her in broad daylight. Resist them, my people, resist them. Resist the colonialists' onslaught. Pay no mind to his agents among us, who chain us with peaceful illusions. Do not fear doubtful tongues. The truth in your heart is stronger, as long as you resist in a land that has lived through raids and victory. So Ali called from his grave, resist my rebellious people. Write me as prose on the agar wood. My remains have you as a response. Resist my people, resist them. Resist my people, resist them. Dareen Tatour. I actually wrote finished these poems on the drive down from Baltimore. And so bear with me because there's changes in here. This is a poem that's more of a narrative poem. It's kind of a story poem. And I've been trying to work in bilingual work a little bit, so there's a lot of Arabic words in here as well and phrases. This is called Fi Aradi Tamani Arba'in, in the territories of 1948. And it's dedicated to my mother-in-law, George. El Sini Ili Fatat, last year, the way the story begins. El Sini Ili Fatat, the one about the Palestinian man stuck in traffic at Yukniam at night. He's driving up from Ramallah and it's late and hasn't brought anything back for the family except a box of dates. He should have stopped for the figs at Tiin ad-Dafur, the only thing his mother will eat now that she's reached her final days. But he's trapped at a standstill in a persistent chain of brake lights. He picks up the phone to call his wife, but then he sees the driver next to him, an uptight-looking Ashkenazi settler type, staring straight at him, giving him the eye. Maybe for talking and driving, maybe just for being alive. The Palestinian man rolls down the window, ready. He's ready. He's been ready since before he was born, with a pocket full of comebacks. And should this settler even say one word, it's all gonna fly. Right there at the curve of Yukniam, which used to be called Kira Wakamun, until the people were expelled and everything they owned, their crops and homes, were razed to make way for this network of highways and byways, kibbutzes and whatnot. El-Mohim, the guy gets the message. He turns away, faces the road with a frozen expression, and inches forward, until between the two of them there is no more line of sight. The Palestinian man breathes, leans back, taps the gas, and slowly moves onward, in stops and in starts, in stops and in starts, until he finally arrives at the scene of whatever has been holding up traffic. And he finds, to his great surprise, that it's a cow. A big dead cow in the middle of the road. A white and yellow cow, the color of summer wheat, with 2 wide open eyes and its 4 feet splayed out in the deadest possible way. Its thick pink tongue a dangling pulse of flesh, dripping blood on the street. And this in Yukniam. And this not far from the high-tech park. And this in Yukniam of all places. Ilifat mat. What's gone is gone. El-Mohim. The man doesn't stop in the glare of the warm exhaust turning red and pushed the animal into the ravine like William Stafford in Traveling Through the Dark. He doesn't behave like Gerald Stern in the poem Behaving Like a Jew. He doesn't touch the cow's face and stare into his eyes and pull him off the road. He says, haram, 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 3 times quietly, passes the animal and drives back to the village as quickly as he can. There are people waiting there for him, lots of people, more than you can imagine, more and more each year. And his only regret right now is that he didn't stop for the figs for his mother. It's the only thing she'll eat now that she has reached her final days. Ilifat mat, wallahi azim. This is the poem that's been scribbled upon and which I know is not done. It's called Wedding at Akka. The fading half moon tethered to the hillside is within reach as we migrate across the Galilee, past Tamra, past Abilene. We can almost touch it through the window as the wind blows us inland from the sea. This is the Palestinian moon, you say, as if that wedge of light had landed in Safad like a returning refugee. Tonight the bride was a swan. Tonight the groom played a mawal on the violin beneath a bower of burning candles. And it was us who was melting in the pause before the song. Shidi himtak, I said. It's not done yet. Shidi hamtak ya ayuni, everything can lift. Like the bride in white, spinning high on the shoulders of her cousins and her brothers, her teeth a spangle of planets in flight. She can never fall, for she is held, fot rasna, by all of us, and beheld in all of this beautiful Palestinian light. I was actually in Palestine when the besiege of Gaza was going on in 2014. I was in Haifa when I wrote this poem, At the Sea. This is called Palestine Summer 2014. As we all know, and as Sharif pointed out, this is the state of siege. This is the state of siege from 48. This is the state of siege from 67 to every single year. And so I share with you this poem. There are things that allow you to take leave of the earth. The sea quarantined behind cement and wire. Chains of signifiers that men have been here. Gun mounts and barbed towers, a crested wave in the shape of a warped neck. There are things that allow you to take leave. 4 small children with frozen faces gray from the dust of rubble, the color red, blossoming beneath motionless heads. In Shujaiya, in Rafah, little Selma swaddled in blood, the Becker boys fleeing on the beach, hovering above the sand. Don't ask me to wait to see what happens when they land. This is how you take leave of ancient cities that rose in the gilded mist of imagination. You take leave, as a monk does, singing in chants and madrigals. You take leave in a spiral motion, a lyric wish, informal passage, so that perhaps your protest may be noted. And I will close my segment with a poem that I wrote. I visited Lebanon, the refugee camps in Lebanon a few years back, and volunteered teaching English in Shatila. And one of the days we took a little field trip down to South Lebanon to go swimming with the kids, and I played a little contest with one of the kids, which many of you probably have played if you swim, where both people put your head under the water and you see who can last the longest. So this is the poem that I wrote for this child that I was playing this game with. It's called Breath Holding Contest in Southern Lebanon. I give up, I say, to the Palestinian boy holding his breath beneath the ripples of a branch of the Litani River. I tap his shoulder and rise to the surface early, my chest half full of oxygen. I could have outlasted him. I give up, I say, but really I let him win. Victorious he grins, without knowing. I've looked out of rain-washed windows and wept over an impossible love. I've tried with others to end the brutality of wars and to find fullness in a life that leaves us all empty-handed in one way or another. Someone ought to triumph in a landslide. Someone ought to smile and gasp with delight for small victory almost worth dying for. I give up, I say to the child, though I haven't really. You win. You're it.